On the day the gates opened, the world fell, and of the countless humans who were dying defenseless against the monsters, only a small number awakened. With their supernatural abilities, they were called saviors of humanity or players. Among them was the protagonist, an F-class player in the Great Steel Emperor, Lee Chun-wook. He was supposed to be called the last savior of humanity. However, this reality at the moment couldn't be more wrong. On a day like any other, our hero appears in a military training where he is ordered to support himself in a plank position using only his head. At this moment, he doesn't understand why he is in this position despite being the last savior of humanity. On a normal day like any other at the AMT shooting range, the soldiers are placed in this humiliating position while receiving a scolding from their superior. At this moment, our hero uses his powers to take out a bullet from his pocket. Because they lost 9 cartridges, the superior questions if the soldiers are out of their minds. Due to the use of his abilities, a system informs that the weight of metal currently available for manipulation is equal to 300 grams. And then the protagonist thought he could never be in his right mind when this was already the second time he was going through the army. In a not-so-distant past, Lee was suddenly defeated, and it is said that these events will happen again in the near future. The person responsible for all that chaos was a hooded man. And at that time, an explosion happened amidst bodies and death. Given this, Lee said that in the end, it wasn't the monsters that exterminated humanity but the players. Thus, the hooded man paid a little attention to the last hero of humanity, the Great Steel Emperor beneath him. And upon removing his mask, revealing his identity, he called him by his true name. In response to the hero, the man said he was wrong because they actually only judge humanity as divine beings do. In this case, Lee got angry upon seeing that sect putting themselves on the same level as gods and stated that if he had discovered how to get stronger before, things would be different. Seeing Lee's frustration, the villain asked the boy not to be so sad because even if he had discovered it earlier, nothing would change. Since the protagonist, in the cultist view, being a useless F rank, would have died right there anyway. In the end, leaving the task of finishing off the hero to one of his subordinates, the man left, saying his enemy would have the most suitable end for an F rank. And amid a scream of fury at his enemy Gordon Tracy, the protagonist unfortunately died. However, he managed to go back to the past in his soldier days, just like in the web novels he read, which became something unexpected. At this moment, the system informed that Lee had learned to get stronger, and that there were 10 minutes left for metal absorption. Back in training, the superior states that he will fix the recruits' corrupted minds and explains that when he says 1, the soldiers should say soldier. And when he says 2, they should respond with mentality. Meanwhile, Lee had already understood that he had gone back to the past along with his abilities. However, faced with all this exhausting training and humiliation, the hero thinks about why he has returned precisely to this terrible time in his life. The training continued for several hours with the soldiers all in formation and counting the exercise sequences. Shortly after, the superior orders the advance of platoon 3 and 2 while some whisper about the day's menu at the military restaurant. Definitely, our hero did not expect to go back to his mandatory service days. After a loud cat growl, the superior informs the waiting squad, which the protagonist is part of, that they will need to do one more thing before eating. In response to the order, Lee comments that they just returned from training. And given this, the one in charge of management smiles maliciously while filtering what he just heard. In this case, the protagonist finally remembers the identity of this guy, who is the trash of the army known as Osanguk. Ignorantly, the soldier questions if his squad should do all the work instead of theirs. Additionally, he says that F-rank players can't even evolve, so they might as well take on more work, which is why they are present in the first place. It is said that in his past life, the protagonist never thought he would get out of F-rank, and in contrast, the soldier continues to intimidate our hero. While everyone looks surprised and laughter, O continues and asks if Lee believes he deserves benefits just for being a corporal. Given this, our hero understands that he was a true loser in his past, and having no answers, the soldier gets irritated by the threatening look he is being given. Thus, he threatens our hero and begins to invoke his D-rank ability to resolve this. After reflecting a bit, Lee states that he will comply with the request, but his condition is that the platoon can eat first. This irritates O, but the hero asks him to look around because others might think he is being abusive. He also states that he is worried O might get involved in strange rumors when he should become a good person in society and someone who will achieve great success. The boy's reaction breaks the bully's expectations, so Lee shouts to the platoon that they should eat quickly and return to work when they finish. Thus, O manages to handle the situation smoothly without fights but becomes somewhat pensive. In this case, the superior orders the soldiers to stop stalling and go eat immediately. Lee, in turn, tells Park to eat and informs him that he is not hungry at the moment, which the boy understands with some sadness. O is now pensive because the current Lee Chun-wook is quite different from the old one. After walking a bit, Lee finally manages to reach a place without anyone watching, allowing him to release all his stress. At this moment, he knew he had done well because the humiliations the hero endured there were nothing compared to what Gordon Tracy made him go through. Recalling his past, Lee understands that if he has to stay there longer due to his problems, he will not be able to surpass his potential. Then Lee grabs a bunch of spoons while commenting that he cannot let the world know he can still evolve. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, someone complains about the lack of spoons and questions if they weren't brought. Thus, one of the recruits reports to Soldier Park that they have a problem because all the spoons simply disappeared. In another setting, Lee is unexpectedly eating all the spoons one after the other, and after that, the system improves his manipulation capacity by 125 grams. The hero knows that an M7 bayonet weighs 140 grams, and if he wants to add more weight for impact, he will only be able to control one of them. The cartridges weigh only 1 gram and spoons have only 125 grams. In this case, it would take a long time for the protagonist to reach the state he was in before he died. However, at the moment, this is the only option he has, and he knows he must prepare in 3 days. So Lee has to defeat the level boss, which will be his next mission to accomplish. With his powers activated, Lee now states that he will show the boss what it means to be a specialist. 3 days later, in the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Battalion at the 5th Post of Namsam, some guards are keeping watch. Among them, a recruit looks at Lee with a curious expression while his colleague is tinkering with the rifle. In this case, the soldier questions why the corporal has changed so much recently, and looking at his watch, Lee asks if this is something that makes his colleague uncomfortable. Thus, the recruit replies that it is nothing like that, and the system informs that the hero can now manipulate 1 kilogram and 300 grams of iron. Trying to explain himself, the recruit says that the corporal has changed for the better, but at that moment, Lee turns to him with a different look. Facing his colleague, the protagonist asks if Park trusts him, which is answered positively since he is his superior. In such a case, the hero activates his weapon while looking at the recruit with pride. And at this moment, that question makes sense because with the unexpected opening of a portal, several monsters start coming out. Among them, some are large and some small, but all are bloodthirsty and in a privileged position at the military base. In the soldiers' dormitory, despite the peaceful atmosphere, one of the monsters appears to kill everyone stealthily, but is intercepted by a dagger. That blade hits the monster squarely, which quickly falls defeated while others of the same species watch restlessly. After having one of their own killed, the monsters go to their colleague's aid to understand what is going on. Lee, in turn, states that he is very happy to see them having waited for 3 whole days. However, that earlier monster was not completely defeated and is now seen standing up ready to continue fighting. Given this, Lee understands that he is very weak because he had never failed in ambushes before. While manipulating that dagger, he knows that this is his second chance in life and he really doesn't like doing the same job twice. With that monster heading to attack again, the hero states that if it secretes anything on him, it will be dead. Thus, with a simple hand gesture, he slits the neck of that invader from the human world, finishing it off completely. After slashing his enemy, the dagger strikes a tree, and the monsters begin to understand the level of hostility of their opponent. From the mutant's body, a bright red orb emerged, and knowing the future, Lee decided to eat it. The monsters were confused by the man's action, but it is said to be mana iron. Lee needs to eat metal to get stronger, and this means that if he eats all the items he finds from now on, he can play this life on easy mode. With an enhancement of his abilities after eating the mana iron, the hero is ready to return to combat. Then he pulls the dagger from the tree with his metal control and prepares to finish off all the invaders to become even more powerful. Going back a bit in the past, in the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Battalion stationed at the 5th Post of Namsan, Lee informed his colleague that he could feel the metal moving, which surprised Park because he thought the hero could only sense the ones he saw. Obviously, the protagonist is lying, but Park states that he must report this, which Lee contests by saying that an officer will not believe the rumor of an F rank. In this case, the recruit asks what they should do, and then the hero asks for one thing to be promised. At that moment, Lee said he would check, and in the meantime, Park should not leave his post. Also, he should never report anything to superiors because if they find out, they will take all the rewards from the fight for themselves. In an abrupt move, Lee fearlessly goes to finish them all off with his newly enhanced abilities. 2 of the monsters in the front of the pack try to strike him with a sword blow. However, the hero dodges with a roll, demonstrating his flexibility. Then he uses his iron manipulation techniques to spin his dagger and cut the Achilles tendon of one of the invaders. But not just one. The protagonist continues to cut the feet of all those mutants with extreme ease, which irritates their leader, watching from afar. Despite various attempts, the monsters do not give up, and one after another, they head towards the protagonist to kill him. However, this was exactly what Lee wanted, and at the moment he was about to be hit by a blow, he used his technique on a fallen sword. In a swift action, the protagonist uses this sword to disarm the monster, hitting one blade against the other. The intruder's blade then flies into the air, causing him to get distracted looking for his weapon. At this moment, our hero takes advantage to finish off the mutant once and for all with a clean cut. Fortunately, the cut proved extremely effective even without killing, which was exactly the hero's intention because his current desire was to maximize fear. Furthermore, the protagonist was furious because in his past life he died from a backstab, just like the monsters were trying to attack him now. In this case, with a menacing expression, Lee states that if any more of them dare do this, he will eat them alive. Thus, the phase of instilling fear in the hearts of the intruders is successfully completed. With this, Lee, confident in his abilities, says it is time to start the main event. Given this, the hero starts looking from side to side, trying to find where his target is. At the moment, he believes it is frustrating to try to do this with his current abilities, and it is said that the current target is the group's monster boss, the Goblin Shaman. Feigning innocence, the hero crouches down casually to pick up the item dropped by the monster's death. He made such a fragile and blatant opening that the shaman could not resist, since he was not as foolish as the other goblins. With the prey sensed on the spot, the only thing left for the protagonist was for the monster to reveal itself. And with a confident look, a monster finally takes its first steps into the battle, casting a spell that starts modifying the ground where Lee stands. In a few seconds, the ground bursts into large pointed beams that begin to pierce any living being nearby. At that same moment in the military barracks, one of the soldiers asks his leader if he also feels the tremors in the ground. In response, the commander questions if the recruit is scared and warns that he will kill him if anyone wakes him up again for something so silly. Back on the battlefield, the tremors result from the spell cast by the goblin boss. Although it is an allied attack, it also affects the allied goblins. However, the boss is a narcissistic being who does not care about his subordinates. In conclusion, after that attack, the protagonist manages to track the location of the shaman, who is hiding up in a tree. Thus, he throws the sword of one of the monsters toward the boss to finish him off. However, even getting close enough, the monster still manages to dodge the perfect attack of our hero. But as the shaman begins to gloat, Lee informs him that it was a false attack and activates his control over his dagger, which was hidden in a strategic location. It quickly moves towards the boss's face, but something happens that surprises the protagonist. Unexpectedly, that monster manages to catch the blade just before it reaches its final trajectory. At this moment, the goblin boss looks at our hero much angrier than before. Lee is then surprised that the dagger was caught in mid-air and comments that he is indeed much weaker than he was in his previous life. Holding his weapon, the hero states that for someone who sent a gang of goblins after him, the boss is quite tough. Furthermore, he called the boss to fight him down below, but this was a bluff. Since the hidden boss came to fight face-to-face with the protagonist, his subordinates got excited. And more importantly, the hero's mana was currently running out, leaving him with only 40% of the total value. Since things have reached this point, the hero decides to take a critical action. Since he cannot defeat them all alone, he ensures that he will die along with the shaman, thus taking him to his superiors. Faced with this audacity, the goblin boss is satisfied, and at this moment, Park unexpectedly shouts for his superior from the depths of the forest. With this, the shaman manages to track the soldier's location and promptly sends all his subordinates to attack him. Lee, in turn, also runs to save his friend, and at the last moment, just before Park is finished off by a sword strike, the monster responsible for the attack takes a few shots in the back, and then the hero's iron manipulation enters into a confrontation with the goblin. Initially, he takes advantage, but our hero does not stand still, and also joins the fight, ending by finishing off the monster with a shot in the mouth. Then others, in a frenzy, join the fray and Lee grips his rifle tightly, already preparing for the worst. However, looking more closely at the area, it is noticed that all the intruders have suddenly disappeared. Thus, Lee understands that he made a grave error in his plan's conclusion. Not only having made a mistake, but all possible ones in the end, the shaman was much more careful than the hero thought. Suddenly, someone on the protagonist's radio says they heard gunshots and orders all posts to report. In this case, as the representative of the 5th post, Lee reports that a portal appeared in this area and repeats several times that all the monsters are goblins. However, after the first advance, all fled the area, and regarding casualties, fortunately, the 5th post reports none. With the report received, an order comes for everyone present at the 5th post to defend the location, which is also repeated several times. In such a case, Lee knows that woman will arrive soon, and in parallel, the state of emergency is declared because a portal is present in the area. Walking through the corridors of the barracks with her subordinates, the paladin and AMT Lieutenant Siu Yunha is present. The hero, in turn, knows that if she comes as in his past life, she will close the portal and steal all the resources. A legendary grade item will be found. If everything goes as expected, it will belong to the army. The legendary item from this portal is adamantium, being in the past the supreme item responsible for why people call the hero the Emperor of Metal. If he misses this chance now, the next one will be only 4 years from now, and if that happens, Lee will be the same as in the past. In this case, the boy knows he needs to get the item before the emergency team arrives. Lee comments that since they are simple goblins, they need a human sacrifice. Park, in turn, is frightened by everything that is happening, but the hero continues to ponder his mission. It is said that goblins living in groups have too high a population density, so the case must be different. At this moment, the representative of the 6th post desperately reports having found the presence of goblins in the area. Given this, a ray of hope appears in the protagonist's life, who is now excited about the mission ahead. Lee then communicates with the 6th post and states that the 5th will support them in this battle. The others, however, reiterate the commander's order for everyone to stay at their posts and mock the ability of an F rank to help. Faced with this, the hero turns off the sound of the walkie-talkie to avoid getting annoyed by such nonsense. But Park grabs Lee's legs because he does not want him to be confined to solitary. The hero, in turn, informs that the 6th post consists of archers and mages, only long-range players who will not be able to deal with the goblins and will die. However, Park says that nothing will change if the corporal goes there alone, so Lee asserts that he will not go alone because he has Park as an ally. This definitely catches the recruit by surprise, but his superior's orders are clear and direct. At post 6, one of the soldiers requests help and informs that Corporal Kim has fallen in battle. It is said that the quick response unit has already departed, so it was up to them to hold their positions with their lives. However, at this rate, everyone would die. With an overhead view of the location, it is clear that the soldiers will not last much longer due to the horde of monsters gathered around the cabin. Locked inside the last support post, the soldier desperately asks if the corporal is okay. However, the corporal's situation is obvious and he states that the barrier will not last much longer. At this moment, the soldier asks on the walkie-talkie when reinforcements will arrive, but suddenly silence takes over, leaving him confused. Outside, the one responsible for the silence turns out to be the monster boss, who is preparing a spell to end this once and for all. Upon casting a spell, a pile of stones of various sizes gathers around the soldier's shelter. With the tremor being felt, the soldiers question what is happening this time. Then with his last strength, the corporal informs that the monster is the boss, and it is said that after destroying the posts, the goblins will capture them. They will take the soldiers to the altar and rip out their hearts while they are still alive. In this case, the corporal points the muzzle of his rifle at his face, knowing that ending it all now will be less painful, causing his ally to burst into tears. Wasting no more time, his shaman finally begins to cast the spell. In a ray of hope, help finally arrives, and a soldier asks the archer to shoot an arrow aiming at the light and stand still. He also orders that when drawing the bow, the fire skill should be used. Outside the cabin, the soldier comments that he needs at least an entire unit of archers at his level to fight. Moreover, he cannot see anything and asks where the hell he should aim with his fire arrow. Given this, the indicated light finally appears at the edge of the forest horizon. Thus, the protagonist orders the archer to just aim at the indicated spot while standing on top of one of the monsters. It is said that he will control the trigger, so Lee pulls the trigger, which surprises the archer as his weapon fired by itself. At this moment, the arrow travels through the shaman's spell stones and finally hits the monster's body. Initially, the goblin tries to pull the arrow from his chest, but a few milliseconds later it explodes, eliminating his chances of defending himself. After this, the system informs that the hero lost 1% of his mana, and he realizes that he can save this way with the archer's destructive power bonus. Given this, both the monsters and the soldiers realize that the monster was hit with precision, which irritates the enemy side. Atop a hill, the shaman now redirects his stones to another location in an organized attack, but fortunately, the soldiers in the path managed to dodge. However, that attack left traces of destruction all over the area it passed through. Shortly after, Lee ordered the archer to reload his bow again so they could continue with the elimination of the monsters. Once again, it is said that after loading the bow, he should aim at the light on the horizon. From the top of that hill, the goblin boss watches everything that is happening, including the destruction of his subordinates by the fire arrows. And this deeply irritates him, making him think that things will not remain this way. Hidden in the bushes, Park wonders how a simple soldier like him will find the monster boss. Moreover, even assuming he finds the monster, he believes he will meet his end if he tries to challenge him. However, the recruit continues lying in the bushes, observing everything from a distance and preparing to react when necessary. It is said that Corporal Lee asked the boy to just distract them, but from what Park is seeing, the hero is finishing off the entire portal alone. Amidst the bushes, Park suddenly encounters one of the goblins who sees the boy and raises his sword in fury to attack him. Fortunately, at this moment, the protagonist intervenes with his metal-controlling ability and attacks the monster's arm with his dagger. After disarming the monster, Lee runs towards it with the light activated and finally uses his talent to pull the trigger. Quickly, Archer fires the flaming arrow that heads toward the goblin's face. The projectile successfully pierces the monster's eye and explodes. At this moment, the protagonist runs past it from behind. Park reports to his superior that the rifle is in position, and at that moment, 3 more goblins are killed by flaming arrows. This makes the recruit wonder if the person in front of him is really the same Corporal Lee Hyunwook. The hero, in turn, thought that the monster had already revealed itself enough and should leave now. However, one possibility was that the boss was waiting for the hero's mana to reach rock bottom while eliminating his partners. Breaking expectations in another part of the forest, Park calls for his partner. Upon being captured by the goblin boss, the recruit begs to be saved and the hero quickly prepares to rescue his friend. However, the shaman is using the soldier as a hostage and shows that any movement could cause the recruit's death. In this case, our hero grits his teeth and drops his weapon, which encourages the surrounding monsters to attack him. 2 of the goblins, in a rage, move to finish off the corporal with their swords drawn. However, it was all part of Lee's plan, who now managed to put the boss in a checkmate. With a simple finger gesture, the protagonist triggers his colleague's weapon, which fires uncontrollably at the goblin boss's body. The shaman, not expecting this, spits blood due to the damage received, and the other monsters continue their assault. Now Lee finally heads towards his friend to save him because the boss is no longer intimidating him. After calling out his name, Park responds with the military commands, stating he is ready. In this case, the protagonist prepares for the monster. Now the hunt begins with Lee throwing his dagger to hit the shaman from behind. The dagger indeed hits but does not pierce the skin due to the shaman's leather armor. At this moment, the system reiterates that the hero's mana will soon be depleted, leaving only 9% of the total value. As the monster tries to run from the protagonist, he questions why it only covered its back. After running for a long period, the goblin boss's objective in his escape is finally visualized, which is simply the portal responsible for the entry. In this case, our hero cannot let the monster return from where it came because he needs the magical crystal from its death. So when the monster was already approaching the portal with its escape being a step away from realization, our hero notices that the shaman's necklace is also made of steel. With his mana at 7%, the protagonist issues a command to pull the monster back by its necklace, and more of the remaining mana starts to deplete. At 2% mana, Lee finally manages to prevent the goblin from fleeing through the portal, but now his resources are scarce, with only 1% of mana left. As his last resort, Lee directs his dagger to hit the monster right in the middle of the face and fortunately succeeds in the attack. At the exact moment the attack was made, the hero's mana was exhausted. Given this, Lee, very tired, understood that his abilities remained the same, but his body was much less athletic. Then, in conclusion, a sacred light is cast into the sky, illuminating the entire area with a strong golden light. Unfortunately, this was the signal that the lieutenant responsible for ruining the protagonist's plans was already there. So little time remains for Lee to turn around and search for the item hidden in the shaman's body. After much searching, the hero finally finds it. However, at the same time, the lieutenant's subordinate soldiers arrive at the portal. In an act of cleverness, the protagonist places the crystal in his mouth to raise his hands in surrender. Thus, the soldiers order the hero to identify himself with his rank and name in the military barracks. Turning around, Lee appeared empty-handed because he managed to ingest the crystal at the last second, so he identified himself as Corporal Hyunwook. With that, the soldiers report having found an injured person amid the chaos of the conflict. A stretcher is requested, and since the portal is still open, they speculate that enemies must be present around the forest. Amid all that destruction, the lieutenant wonders if 4 regular soldiers were capable of taking down the monster boss. However, upon closer inspection, she notices that all the monsters have similar wounds, indicating that this was definitely the work of just one man. On his stretcher, the system congratulated the hero for consuming the legendary adamantium item and informed him that 10 days would be needed for full absorption. The absorbed metal is enchanted, and after absorption, the protagonist will develop magical abilities similar to the enchantment. After the absorption, the expected weight increase is determined. Meanwhile, the lieutenant questions why the soldier is laughing in such a situation. The system once again congratulates him, informing that immediately after consuming the legendary item, a rare ability is revealed. In this case, he can now detect all metals within his control area, which makes Lee finally recover. On the radio, a soldier reports that 2 goblins are fleeing near post number 6. As everyone heads to the event location, the hero, in turn, notices that he can now sense the resonance of all metals around him. With clenched fists raised, Lee happily states that this day is the day the Great Steel Emperor finally made his return. A few days after the portal incident in the barracks at the 1st Battalion Station of the 3rd Brigade, one of the soldiers comments that she heard the rumors about the F rank are true, having heard it from Ajushi himself. Continuing, she said that other workers were just waiting to die, but suddenly an F rank corporal appeared with a huge sword and sliced the goblins. The soldier's colleague believes it to be a fantasy because the situation doesn't make sense, and in the background, a soldier feels sick due to the unit's climate. Then he yells, questioning if they really want him to believe this nonsense. This is Sergeant Oh Sang-buk of the Magical Affiliation and Communication Specialist. Promptly, his subordinate asserts that it is true, but one of the superiors asks him to lower his voice. In this case, trembling with fear, the soldier states that he will correct it, and the other comments that the sergeant did not return his salute. In this case, Soldier Park and Ill's hands should have been raised. The sergeant, in turn, asks who the next standout candidate is, which is answered as the bully known as Lee Won-suk. Oh questions if the soldier can close a portal with only 3 recruits, and the boy responds that it is impossible. In this case, the sergeant comments that he did not see the workers defeating the boss on their own, so his conclusion is that something else closed the portal. However, a mere F-rank soldier starting to gain all this fame due to a mere act of luck could cause problems in military discipline. The soldier then clearly understands the message and smiles because he will greatly enjoy what he's about to do. Later, on a sunny day at the headquarters, something quite important is happening in the battalion commander's office. Saluting, our hero states that he came because he had business to attend to in the commander's office. However, he thinks that if things had ended well, they could have let it go, but they still had to call him. Among the personalities present is Lieutenant Seo Yunha, a B-rank player known by her moniker, a Black Paladin. Besides her, Lieutenant Lee Mini is also present. He is a C-rank mage of the Magical Affiliation and Teleportation Specialist. Without further ado, the commander questioned if Lee was responsible for disobeying the order to wait and repel the first wave force from the gate. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Kim Kangshuk, nicknamed the King of the Namsan Mountains, is a B-rank player ranked 166th in the Korean ranking. Lee knows that if he says something wrong, he will end up in a military tribunal. In this case, he must control himself as much as possible to avoid problems with the guard. Thus, he confirms that he took control of the outbreak at the gate while on duty, having responded immediately. Given this, the lieutenant colonel states that he saw the report, but even so, he could not understand it since the soldier had always been just an F rank. In such a case, the commander stated that the recruit should have been shredded by the monsters. At this moment, an incredibly intense pressure is felt, and the hero understands that if he backs down now, his entire military career will go down the drain. Feeling wronged, Lee asserts that the battalion commander was lying when he said certain words in the past. In response to this affront, the orange-haired lieutenant intervenes, reprimanding the soldier for disrespecting the commander. However, the commander himself decided to stop this interference because he was curious to know where he had lied in the past. Thus, Lee explained that there was something the commander emphasized every time during joint training, something he said without fail every time. Not long ago, the commander used to say that no matter how low the ranking was, as long as the person was using the tactical book. Thus, he said that even if it were a D rank or even an E rank soldier, they would be able to face trolls. So Lee explains that according to his training, even as an F-rank soldier with difficulties facing trolls, a goblin, however, is not so impossible. Then the protagonist comments that despite disobeying the order at the command center, if he hadn't supported the 6th post, all the soldiers would have died. With his defense exposed, our hero believes he has done a good job responding rationally, so now it is time to attack emotionally. At this moment, a memory of the commander saying that for a true soldier there are no classifications comes to the hero's mind. Therefore, he responds that, as always emphasized by the lieutenant colonel, he was just doing his job as a result of his training. Lee states that he took the tactics they learned after his difficult training seriously, doing his best to respond and implementing a strategy with the recruits. Moreover, he says that the only reason he could endure his military life while being mocked was because of the true military mentality instilled by the commander. He adds that seeing the commander now denying the results of this belief was turning the protagonist's entire life into a lie. Finally, it was explained that this was why Lee felt betrayed by the battalion commander. Shortly after being named second lieutenant, the gates began to open, and Kim almost died in a fight against orcs, but without hesitating for a second, he returned to the army. He became a founding member of the AMT, in other words, he is a soldier to the core. What the hero said to him was that he took his superior's words as his belief, risking his life for his comrades. In this case, it was unlikely that the commander would put him on military trial, and at this moment, he himself touches the protagonist's shoulders, saying he understood. After hearing the boy's speech, Kim asks if this is truly the soldier's belief, and yells for not hearing an immediate response. Thus, the commander decisively asked Lee to become a non-commissioned officer immediately, and the system congratulated the hero for absorbing the material but also granted him a new ability called Steel Physique, which strengthens a part of the body. Receiving the commander's recognition was a secret system mission to unlock the new ability, but at the moment, everyone is too surprised to notice. Despite the various reactions in the room, the commander remains serious in his words, making the protagonist start to sweat cold. So he just questions himself if he heard wrong. Later in the 3rd Brigade, in the training room of the 1st Battalion, everyone is striving to improve their skills. Lee is no exception and is currently bench pressing 25 kilograms on each side, totaling 80 kilograms. After finishing his set, the boy thinks he stepped in it by trying to avoid the guard. From a distance, the two bullies watch the protagonist with a malicious look, ready to put their plan into action. At the moment when the commander offered the position to the protagonist, the red-haired lieutenant opposed it because he was an F-rank soldier. And thanks to the persuasion of the platoon leader Lee Mini, the hero gained some time to think about it. But now it's better to live like a rat than draw attention. Suddenly the bully approached, greeting the soldier and asking if he had finished using the bench, to which he responded he had not. However, Lee looks around and notices that an equipment identical to his is free on his left side. So he looks at the soldier's face, noticing the visibly apparent malice, and asks what he is doing now. The soldier in turn removes the bench press bar from the rack and starts curling it while mocking the strength of the famous recruit in the unit. Given this, everyone is impressed by the man's strength, and in the background, some of the bullies start laughing at the protagonist. Upon closer inspection, it is revealed to be Sergeant O, who is now trying to destroy Lee's newly built morale. The hero knows that if he starts avoiding him now, he will begin to openly intimidate him as in his past life, which is incredibly irritating. In this case, despite having just decided not to draw anyone's attention for now, this variable changed the protagonist's plans. Feeling anger, Lee believes is the perfect moment to let off steam and decides to challenge the bully to a fight in the ring, which surprises everyone. Later, the fight between the two is about to happen, with the ace of the group, Soldier Wonsuk, facing the famous F-rank Soldier. Since these are two famous personalities in the unit, the fight attracts many curious onlookers to the outside of the arena. Confidently, the two prepare, adjusting their gloves on their hands, and Wonsuk, with a malicious expression, states it is time to teach our hero a lesson. Due to his overconfidence in his strength, the bully decides to start the fight with a direct charge. With all his might, he prepared a punch with his left hand that, if it hit, would cause serious damage. That same night, in a different location from the barracks, two soldiers are talking, and one of them is surprised that Choi Yeonjun has gone on vacation. He was excited to hear that Choi had the talent to become a holy swordsman and wanted to see him in person. So the other soldier explains to his second lieutenant, Chien, that Sergeant Choi may be the center of attention now, but there is another with the potential to be an ace in the future. It is said that he has barbaric characteristics, which makes the second lieutenant and tactical instructor of the Black Tiger unit curious. The soldier, in turn, comments that they came all the way there and it wouldn't be cool to leave his superior empty-handed, so he suggests they take a look at the other guy. Back to the fight, the protagonist narrowly dodges the punch aimed at his face, planting his foot on the ground and managing to duck another one. With his posture stabilized, the hero can defend himself repeatedly. However, the bully's charge eventually throws the protagonist against the ring's ropes. Wasting no time, Wonsuk heads towards Lee to land the punch that would end the fight, impressing and scaring everyone. But fortunately, Lee manages to dodge again, now with a well-calculated roll that makes him appear on the other side of the ring. With this, Lee looks into Wonsuk's eyes and provokes him by gesturing with his hand for him to come at him, making the bully furious. All the soldiers are paying attention to the fight, which now promises to become increasingly intense. Given this, the previous soldier happily comments to his second lieutenant that it seems the soldiers organized this fight, especially for Mr. Chien. So he asked what the second lieutenant thought of the boy and praised his punches for resembling shots. In this case, after rigorously analyzing the fight, Chien explains that punches that do not hit their opponent have no quality. Then the soldier asserts it is due to the recruit's lack of experience in fighting, but guarantees that one accurate punch will be enough to make the opponent fall. Watching the combat, O is extremely irritated with Wonsuk's performance and orders him to stop holding back and do something already. Other soldiers agree, saying angrily that this is not a sparring match and that some of them bet on Wonsuk's victory. All this pressure starts to make the bully lose control because he is not holding back, and at the moment, his body feels strangely heavy. Back in the charge, Wonsuk prepares for another punch, but the protagonist uses his metal power to manipulate the iron elements in his boots. Thanks to the protagonist's metal control power, Lee can manipulate the fight's outcome covertly by increasing the weight of his opponent's feet. Wonsuk tries to land more punches but realizes something is wrong with him due to his unusually slow movements. It is said that at the moment, the bully probably feels like he's fighting in a swamp. With this, the soldier asks to stop the fight because his legs feel strange. In this case, with a smile, Lee asks if things are not going as the boy wanted, which makes him angrier than ever. The soldier then puts aside these trivial issues and decides to unleash his true power to finish off the hero once and for all. So Wonsuk releases his berserker body strengthening ability, and everyone is impressed by the size of the boy's body. With this, Lee understands that things are now more serious than ever and prepares for what is to come. Faced with the body strengthening transformation, the second lieutenant is indignant because it is a training, but he notices that the boy's opponent is not scared. In this case, Chien makes an analogy that the fight between the two resembles a furious buffalo and a leopard showing its fangs. As the fight is about to resume, the second lieutenant states that this will be fun while his subordinate praises Wonsuk for his ability. A D rank using a strengthening ability was very rare, and at this moment the bully stated he wanted to finish the fight by disappearing, and then appearing right in front of the hero, managing to land a punch that doesn't even give the opponent a chance to react. Since it was a punch strengthened by the soldier's innate ability, the protagonist goes flying until he is stopped by colliding with the ring's ropes. Given this, O shows immense happiness while cheering for the soldier and praising his level of fighting. However, after that punch, Wonsuk's hand turned completely red, making him realize that the impact was like hitting a metal plate with his bare hands. After the collision, fortunately, our hero finds himself in a favorable position due to using the body strengthening transformation. The body strengthening transformation involves converting a part of the body into metal. In this case, the hero decided to transform both his arms. Thus, he starts mocking Wonsuk, which irritates him for losing and being humiliated by a mere F rank. With another furious punch thrown, the protagonist easily dodges and reaches a weak spot of his enemy. While preparing a reinforced kick, Lee thinks that using this ability on a person like this boy is a waste of time. But for bad people like him who act as if they are the strongest, Lee decided to make an exception. After punches and kicks, the hero thinks that taking a beating will serve as a cure for the soldier's terrible personality. At this moment, the protagonist beats the bully, pinning him to the ground and landing multiple blows that prevent him from defending himself. Thus, the second lieutenant thought that the F-rank soldier had finally shown his fangs. With more and more punches being thrown, Chien understands that the leopard has finally bitten the neck of its prey. However, a wild buffalo like Wonsa could never let its prey go after grabbing its neck. Just as in the animal kingdom, at this moment, the soldier must not let his prey breathe. Then, lifting Lee by the neck, Wonsa curses our hero for using cheap tricks. However, he says that in any case, he will definitely kill the protagonist right now. So about to be thrown to the ground by that brute, Lee tries to find a quick solution to his problem as he has no more time to waste. In a skillful and intelligent move, the protagonist grabs the giant's arm and wraps his legs around his neck, stopping his punch from advancing. Due to his prior experience, Wonsa knows this is an armbar, and the second lieutenant knew that if the boy had landed the punch, he would have broken his own arm instantly. So it was a fact that the buffalo had above-average instincts. However, the lieutenant wonders if he overestimated Wonsa, seeing that no normal player could defeat a barbarian using body strengthening. In this case, while his arm is being twisted, Wonsa screams that the hero is really fighting for his life, but the soldier is confident that his arm will not be crushed so easily. However, when trying to launch another attack, one of his fingers is caught by Lee. To free himself from the twist, Wonsa lets go of the hero to try to finish him off with punches. However, this was the chance the protagonist needed to turn the tables. Thus, he slips through the massive soldier's body, finally managing to secure a rear naked choke from behind. Observing everything from afar, the second lieutenant gets excited and understands that Lee made the right decision because body strengthening does not prevent the carotid artery from being compressed. In this case, Wonsa, irritated, says that all he needs to do is use his brute strength to get the boy off him. However, the body strengthening transformation ability was being used, and at this moment, even the hero himself couldn't release his arms. Then a system warning appeared, informing the protagonist that he was using the transformation in a wider area than his current limit. It is said that excessive use beyond the limit could crush the conjurer's body. As the fight unfolds, one of the soldiers asks Surgeon O if they should stop them, as Wonsa's personality suggests he will not give up. From another point of view, Lee is doing all this to show what will happen to the surgeon if he continues to torment him. Despite it being a non-verbal message, O understood the message clearly. At this moment, Wonsa is clueless as to why he is losing to a loser like the protagonist and despairs at the possibility of being humiliated in public. With his fury boiling over, the boy refuses to give up and starts unleashing even more power than before. Thus, his size grows exponentially, even starting to destroy the environment due to the high pressure. However, Lee is still firm and strong with his chokehold locked in, which gradually begins to create a purple pressure bubble on the boy's neck. Chien finds it surprising that Wonsa is using D-level body strengthening twice, but if he doesn't manage to free himself from the chokehold, the fight will end soon. Thus, a question arises about which of the two will be the loser. Without giving up, Lee applies more and more pressure to his chokehold, finally causing the brute to completely collapse. After much effort, Wonsa falls unconscious to the ground due to his artery being in a critical state of compression. The outcome of the fight leaves everyone shocked. However, the second lieutenant is pleased to witness the birth of an indomitable beast. With the end of the fight, the soldiers rush to assist the loser and fortunately realize that he is still breathing, having only fainted. In light of this, Park runs toward his companion while commenting that he knew from the beginning that he would win. However, while showing concern for his colleague, Lee merely pushes the boy's face away with his hand. Having witnessed such a display of strength, Surgeon O now decides to look away from Lee, understanding that he is no longer someone he can handle. Impressed with the fight's outcome, the second lieutenant approaches the hero and asks for the soldier's name. Upon realizing it is First Lieutenant Chien, the protagonist makes the appropriate salutations and informs him that he is Corporal Lee from the first post. In response, Chien states that he is the tactical attack instructor of the Black Tiger unit and praises the recent duel as something quite impressive. As he hands over a card, the second lieutenant asks if the hero is interested in joining special combat operations. Everyone in the place understands how important the Black Tiger unit is, being the best troop of the AMT, and they are surprised that a position in the unit is being offered. Although honored by the recognition, Lee states that he is just an F-rank player. In this case, Chien asserts that the rank is merely a standard established by normal people, which is not the case for the hero. Given this, the protagonist maintains his calm expression, but in his mind he rebels against everyone wanting to claim him. It is said that the military is a very close place, so Lee will certainly get involved in confrontations with groups of villains later on. With the card in his hand, Chien asks if the hero will make him keep holding it, so Lee takes the card, thanking him for the kindness. He states that he will think about it, but knows that his priority at the moment is to stay out in the public eye. O, for his part, didn't like the recognition the soldier was receiving at all, entering a state of fury like never before. Later, in the battalion commander's office, he is asked how the Black Tigers are doing. In this case, the second lieutenant comments that his platoon is understaffed. Kim, in turn, knows that nowadays guilds recruit everyone from C rank and above, so it is expected that most talents are taken outside. Since both are going through the same problems, they look at each other, transmitting a non-verbal message. Then the commander laughs and asks if the second lieutenant is there because of Sergeant Choi Young-jun, known as the Holy Swordsman. With a good laugh, Chien confirms that he heard correctly and asks if he is on leave. However, while holding his tea, he also explains that thanks to this, he managed to find a very interesting soldier. That soldier is our hero, who in Chien's view is someone extremely competent with a bright future ahead. After staring at each other for a while, Kim decides to stop drinking his tea and asks about this soldier's nickname. Meanwhile, the protagonist runs extremely tired on the training field despite already being late at night. In a building behind the track, the commander observes everything while talking on a phone call. He states that he is the battalion commander on the line and explains that he doesn't see anything unusual, but asks to find out what Corporal Lee did before joining the army. Even while busy exercising, Park keeps following the protagonist and asking how he can get stronger. The boy says he wants to be like his superior, but Lee doesn't pay much attention because he is currently committed. Back on the phone call, Kim confirms that the person on the other end can take care of the corporal this way. As he watches Lee running in extreme exhaustion, he states from afar that it is not his fault what is about to happen. And with a malicious smile, the commander says it is the corporal's fault for making others so greedy. In the city center, things are happening normally like any other day. However, suddenly a child from a certain family spots an animal running at the back of the alleys. Being a very curious boy, he goes after the animal, believing it to be a monkey. He runs to the alley and calls for the animal. However, upon closer inspection, he realizes it is something entirely different from what he expected. The boy then starts to cry because what is in front of him is actually a monster. And just like that, thousands of the same species start pouring out of a portal that appeared at the end of that alley. In another scene, our hero is very surprised by what is in front of his eyes. At this moment, he is in the battalion's arsenal, observing all the items stored there. The lieutenant explains that in recognition of his achievements, the commander is offering him a leave and a weapon, but the platoon leader still doesn't trust Lee. In this case, the protagonist thought that nothing had changed because the girl remained as arrogant as she was in his previous life. As he looks at some of the items, Lee states that everything is in the past, whether she believes in him or not. This reaction piques the lieutenant's interest, who comments that the boy is really quite conceited. The girl mentions that the sword marks on the enemies near the gate were all his, meaning the boy stopped the first wave of goblins alone. So she questioned if that really made any sense, and at that moment, Lee removed the cloth covering one of the items, choosing it as his weapon. Given this, the girl comments that the hero should not choose a random weapon just because he is being pressured, but Lee says he really likes this one. Because the hero has access to the system, he can understand the true value of the sword, which is named Cloud Blade. It has the power to absorb water and release a damp mist, which might seem like a useless item at the moment. However, in the future, Sergeant Choi will become known as the Sword Saint with this weapon, and the item's true name will be revealed as the Dark Hand of the Cloud Master. In Dangan mythology, along with Hwanwon's three weather gods descended to Earth: the Lord of the Wind, the Master of Rain, and the Master of Clouds. Among them, the god who controlled the clouds was the Master of Clouds, and his dark hand was called the Hand of Darkness, which, with a simple interpretation, meant hidden blades among the clouds. The hidden blades among the clouds were nothing but the Thunder God, who, when unleashing his full power, became capable of using powerful lightning. Thus, with this weapon in his possession, Lee will have enough offensive power to invade a medium-sized monster dungeon alone. With the combination of steel and lightning, nothing can beat that. So despite it being an unpopular choice at the moment, Lee knows he is taking the right path. The lieutenant, in turn, questioned if this insignificant little sword wouldn't be too small a reward considering the hero's achievements. However, he said he was happy with it because even if he wanted to, he wouldn't have time to choose another. At this moment, a tremor is felt throughout the hall, and the emergency signal goes off due to a portal break-in at L1. With the alarm sounding, all the soldiers leave their posts to go help. However, Lee looks at the situation seriously, which confuses the lieutenant because he is so calm, as if he had been expecting this. At the accident site in the city, the soldiers are already in position, and the break area is restricted to normal population entry. Soon, some soldiers in iron armor approach to handle the situation. The military is impressed because it is the first time they see the Blue Flower Guild, and another one informs that the guild has sent some reinforcements to the portal. Looking at all those armors and weapons, the soldiers say they are designer goods. One of them comments that if what they see in front of them is sold, it would be possible to buy a building in Gangnam. And another says he will be transferred to the Blue Flower Guild after his service and will spend his entire life flaunting. At this moment, Lee leads a group of soldiers and keeps them in formation, ready for what is to come. As heard from the platoon deputy commander on the way there, this time they were dealing with a kobold portal. Even though they are small monsters, they use poison needles and gas, causing casualties in some cases to be higher than against orcs. In this case, one of the soldiers rolls up his sleeves and is immediately reprimanded by the protagonist for being on duty. The soldier questions if they need to be so serious, so Lee explains that this situation is not a training exercise and asks if he wants to be killed by a kobold. Feeling downcast, the boy replies that he doesn't want to, and Lee reiterates not to forget to inspect the gas masks carefully in case of an emergency. Amid their conversation, one of the soldiers humorously comments that it seems even trash units have strategy meetings. Concluding, he said that looking at that dialogue, someone might mistake them for an invasion support squad, and this mockery lowered the soldiers' morale. Lee, in turn, tells the rebellious soldier Kwak Jinkyul that many kobolds are escaping from the red soil during the invasion, necessitating caution. In this case, while cursing the hero in his mind, a man claims he can handle such monsters alone. He also comments that he is not one of the wimps who have to listen to advice from an F-rank like Lee. Given this, the protagonist reiterates that he has warned them in case of fatalities, but Kwak just walks away, mocking the commander's squad. This lowers the soldiers' morale even further, and Lee becomes furious with this insolence. Promptly, he shouts, ordering everyone to return to reality. He says this is not the first time they have heard this, but since it is a real-life situation, they cannot lose their spirit. And with this encouragement, the soldiers shout their understanding to their superior. Changing the subject, Lee states that the kobolds are small, so they need to install motion sensors in the sewers and narrow passages. Thus, an order is given for everyone in the platoon to do this within a maximum of 20 minutes. After most of the soldiers are dismissed, Lee calls Park for a private matter. In the background, two soldiers from the platoon comment among themselves that the corporal seemed quite anxious that day, more serious than usual. At this moment, a special focus is given to the restricted zone and the protagonist's perspective on all this. A bit awkwardly, Park asks why his superior looks so serious. However, unexpectedly, before he can speak, Lee is hit by a dart in his neck. Quickly, the dart's poison begins to take effect and the hero falls to the ground due to weakness. At the same moment, the sewers start to explode and poisonous gas begins to come out of them. Within moments, various regions in the area begin to emit that poisonous gas, which gradually takes over everything and everyone, especially the soldiers. Having remembered the masks in advance, some manage to survive the attack. However, others are not so lucky and are devoured alive by the kobolds attacking in large packs. Among the unlucky ones, Lee is being consumed by the poison without any protection against the mist. Within seconds of the attack, one of the monsters slowly appears behind the protagonist. This is their leader, who unexpectedly decided to reveal himself now to one of the prey he believed had no chance of survival. Our hero is surprised but has no time to think as the kobold draws a blade from its sheath. Ready, it directs an attack to stab the hero in the face. However, fortunately, at the last second, someone appears, knocking the monster down with a body slam. After saving the hero from being stabbed, the soldier asks if the corporal is okay, but Lee's condition is worsening. Amid all that mist, the monster could see the human's faces clearly and irritated, grabbed his dagger to attack again. Even in a deplorable situation, the hero gathered strength to tell his friend to run, but he couldn't understand why and only handed over the gas mask. Unfortunately, the warnings were not enough and Park is decapitated by the monster attacking him from behind in a cowardly act. Given this, Lee fills with rage as he screams for his companion but cannot do anything due to his current condition. Suddenly, the whole situation reverts to the beginning, with the soldier questioning why Lee called him there. In his previous life, Park was killed by the kobolds while trying to save the hero from death. Given this time precautions are doubled, with everyone already determined to install the sensors. Lee, knowing that the main battle of the portal will be at the rear, calls for Park. In this case, he asks his superior to move forward and states that he will obey any orders given. The protagonist, in turn, warns that he will send a signal to the soldier later, and when he does, the squad members should be taken out. This leaves the soldier confused, but at that moment, a jeep approaches at full speed. Desperately, Park asks his superior if this will be an armed desertion. However, with a gleam in his eye, Lee states that it is merely an effective war tactic. In the radio zone, Delta, Epsilon, and Gamma report no survivors in the area, and in Beta, the monster's nest is discovered in Zone B9. The estimate is that there are over 200 kobolds, and at this moment, some soldiers are preparing to break down the entrance gate to a warehouse. Entering into wide-range magic, the soldiers' formation is activated within seconds of the signal. Without delay, they break down the building's door. On the radio, the infiltration of Point P is confirmed and Formation A is released with the soldiers advancing. Then the attack squad is ordered to release the magic circle and wait. However, little by little, an immense horde of bloodthirsty kobolds began to surround the soldiers. Like true animals, they charge in a frenzied attack, using their superior numbers to their advantage. Incredibly, the soldiers remain still. They are ordered to wait until the last minute, even with an imminent attack approaching. Thus, at the last second, with one of the monsters practically touching the magic circle, they are finally given the order to open fire. After all that calm, the soldiers attack with full force, subjugating the entire enemy front. With powerful fire magic being cast, all the monsters hit are cremated alive without any chance to react. Back in the area under the protagonist's command, he is ordering everyone to hurry with their tasks. In Zones 2 and 5, all sensors are installed. Additionally, some preparations are made by the platoon commander himself. In this case, upon seeing this, one of the soldiers asks what Lee is doing. As he is a superior, Lee salutes him and explains that he is installing motion sensors according to the manual. Furthermore, he is marking the relevant locations with aluminum tape. Given all the support from the Blue Flower Guild, Lieutenant Minhui tells the hero to stop acting foolish because of a simple kobold portal. It is said that the first platoon will start the operation in 20 minutes, and then the support team should just pick up the detox potions. Given this, Lee shouts that the support team's mission, as transmitted by the deputy platoon commander, is different. It is to prevent the monsters from escaping behind and entering the civilian area. Considering the turmoil this could cause if Minhui decides to go against the superior's orders after everyone heard it, he becomes deeply irritated. The lieutenant states that the corporal has forgotten his place because the platoon commander showed him some favoritism. However, he is still the only guy in the barracks with just one real battle experience in a portal. Considering this, Minhui orders the hero to wipe that smug look off his face because he has nobody to teach him anything. Suddenly, a girl appears running and cuts off the argument before any conclusions are made. This is Sergeant Choi Shionha, who decided to come there to ask the second platoon leader if something was wrong. Noticing the presence of the vice leader in front of him, the lieutenant is left speechless. Then Lee feels proud for having decided to call the girl in advance because she is the lieutenant's weakness. With a smile, Minhui tries to disguise his frustration, saying that the support team seemed to have difficulty assessing the area, so he showed them what a real battle was like. However, with a bashful and blushing look, he asks why the girl is there. In this case, Choi reminds him that the battalion commander called for Corporal Lee, which leaves him quite confused. From the top of the city building, Lieutenant Seo prepares to make her move along with her subordinate soldiers. In a privileged position, they observe something with zoom lenses. Through binoculars, the girl watches the protagonist's conversation with the sergeant. Choi asks the corporal not to let the second platoon leader unsettle him, and Lee, somewhat awkwardly, says he still has work to do. But with a sweet smile, the girl says she will finish setting up the sensors alone, so there is no need to wait any longer. Our protagonist, in turn, thinks that he doesn't have much time left and wonders what the battalion commander is planning. From the top of that building, one of the subordinates asks the lieutenant if she is sure it is safe for the attack squad to be there even under direct command. So as the soldier said, Seo states that these are the battalion commander's orders and that the soldiers should just follow the orders given to them. Later, at the battalion commander's temporary command post, Lee salutes and informs them that he is there due to being called. Inside the post, Kim is with Chien, and without further ado, Kim explains the reason for Lee's summons. In his thoughts, the hero does not understand why the first lieutenant is with the commander. Kim, in turn, says that he will put the corporal to the test by having him take Yeonjun's place, serving as the temporary leader of Platoon 1 in the second attack mission on the portal. In this case, Lee desperately thought that this man had never paid attention to him in his previous life, but now things were getting out of his control. He thinks he doesn't have time for this, but knows he needs to compose himself. On the other hand, the hero asserts that he has only executed missions with the support team since he was assigned to the base, so this wasn't even a training exercise. In conclusion, the hero sees no reason to risk the lives of the first platoon in a real battle, but Kim firmly states that this is his order. Lee bites his lips in frustration, and at that moment, the Delta Line reports that the boss monster has left the kobold nest, which will require more vigilance in the vicinity. Given the information, the protagonists understand that the support team will be attacked soon and that if he doesn't arrive in time, the rear squad will be annihilated. In this case, Lee decides to stop with the secrecy and states that he has something to tell the platoon commander Kim, who listens attentively to all explanations. After that, the lieutenant from the same building now observes the protagonist through her binoculars and is confused to see him there. The boy, in turn, doesn't stop for even a second in his frantic run because, at this moment, the support team needs him to survive. As he runs, the hero remembers that the poisonous gas will soon be released throughout the area. And finally, the alarm sounds, catching everyone in the rear battalion by surprise. Just as in the past, various regions with air vents begin to release a massive amount of poisonous gas. Unfortunately, the poisonous gas is released right next to the hero, who is once again without his protective mask. So while covering his nose with his arm, Lee panicked because events were unfolding much faster than he remembered. Back to the conversation Lee had at the temporary command post with the platoon leader. The boy stated that he heard that in his first mission, Kim lost all of his platoon members. Given the hero's boldness in bringing this up to Kim's face, both soldiers are surprised. Lee, in turn, says he can't believe he is being ordered to join the combat team because of a test, even though he is just a mere corporal from a low platoon. In this case, the boy implies that Kim also considers regular soldiers as disposable by suggesting a test with them. Given this, the commander explains that there is a misunderstanding, but before he can give his version, the hero cuts him off. Lee asserts that if it is to follow the commander's orders, he would gladly give his life. However, despite the confidence being shown in his mind, the protagonist is quite anxious because he cannot tell Kim that he knows what will happen in the future. Nevertheless, he continues to explain that if he, with his lack of combat experience, is to command someone else's squad, there will be a real possibility of casualties. Lee states he is very grateful for the battalion commander's expectations of him, but says that if the price of this validation is the lives of his comrades, he will have to disobey the orders. The hero's words generate silence in the room, and given this, the second lieutenant explains to the corporal that disobedience in times of war is a capital offense. Of all the people, Lee knew this best, but if he didn't go now, everyone in the rear would die. In this case, after thinking for a bit, Kim decides to yield to the corporal's desire to continue with his original mission, greatly relieving the hero's mind. However, obviously, Kim states that as a true soldier, Lee will have to deal with the consequences of disobeying orders later. To not miss the next part, activate the notification bell and see you next time on Tob's channel.